We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including some offseason trade speculation around teams like the Vancouver Canucks, the Montreal Canadiens, Colorado Avalanche, and the Buffalo Sabres. Plus, we came across an interesting article discussing why we haven't possibly seen any offer sheets this offseason. There was a lot of speculation that there could be several. We've had zero, and the prime one being Mason McTavish. What is going on there, and why are teams maybe reluctant to do so? Plus, we have a signing in Toronto with Nick Robertson. Plus, we also have some big updates on some NHL legendary people, including Jagr and Chara. And big news regarding another first-round pick, Robertson McQueen, heading to college. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots of updates and lots of news and rumors to take a look at here in today's video. Let's kick things off with the news out of Toronto today that arbitration has been avoided for Nick Robertson. They've come to an agreement, signed a contract here today on August 2nd. The hearing was scheduled to take place tomorrow if this wouldn't have happened. But I think both sides are quite pleased that they've been able to avoid that whole process. As we had learned, there was about $1 million gap between the Nick Robertson asking price and the Toronto Maple Leafs offering point that was submitted to the arbitrator. But as we discussed in the last few videos, where some cases have made it to that point, that's very much strategic reasons why they submit the numbers that they do. Neither side expects to get what they're submitting, and quite often it's somewhere in the middle that they end up settling on, and that's exactly what happened here. Obviously, there was about $1 million gap. The team was looking around $1.2 million. Robertson was around, I think, 2.25 or something like that. So, it's pretty much almost identically halfway. I suggested yesterday we're probably going to see a contract around 1.6 to 1.7. AFP Analytics had projected Robertson around, I think it was around 1.6. So this is just a smidge above that, but it gets the deal done. I mean, he's basically been a 15 goal scorer for 2 years. And like I said, that's with limited opportunities. So we will see. I think the Leafs still have some reluctance to really trust Robertson to play a bigger role and give a bigger commitment longer term. But, with everything that's changed with the team this year, I'll be curious to see if Robertson can maybe find more of an opportunity with Toronto. But I do think this is probably your last opportunity for Robertson to either solidify his spot and really impress the team to the point where they play him every day and they give him more opportunity, or he does get moved. But I think he's been a pretty decent player for them. Obviously, there's parts of his game, like a lot of young players, that still need improvement. But the fact he's been able to put back-to-back seasons, in that 14, 15 goal mark with limited ice time and not even being, an absolute regular in the lineup every single day, I think is pretty decent. So I think he still has potential and has not been anywhere near his ceiling yet. So it's nice to see them avoid arbitration. Another signing as well, but this one's outside the NHL. NHL veteran Jagr Vrana, of course, who worked his way back to Washington last year, bounced around a bit. Obviously, we know he's been through a player assistance program. He's obviously had a lot of earlier success in his career, most of which came with Washington. He's had some success afterwards, played in Detroit and St. Louis, so he ended up back with the Capitals briefly there as well. And now he's signing over in Sweden to play in the SHL. So it looks like Vrana's time in the NHL has come to a close. We also found out today that it looks like Anaheim Ducks first-round pick from the 2025 draft, the very large Robertson McQueen, is heading to college and is expected to be committing to going to Providence College in the NCAA. So obviously the Western Hockey League, who produced a lot of high-end talent, which was drafted in the 2025 draft, a lot of those players have opted to head to college next year, which is going to see a mass exodus, if you will, out of the Western Hockey League, which of course is part of the CHL. It's really unfortunate. I mean, it's nothing the league did. It's nothing that the league can do about it either. It's just the changing times with, the eligibility requirements and the rules changing here. For some of these prospects that are higher end, it's just going to be likely a better developmental path in many cases to go to the college route, play against older, bigger, stronger players to help them prepare for their NHL careers. So Robertson McQueen appears to be heading to Providence College. Another update as well on a contract that's not yet done, and that's Calgary Flames and restricted free agent forward Connor Zary, who certainly had a pretty good season last year, certainly broke through and appears to have found himself a pretty regular spot. But obviously now that the big thing is getting him re-signed. At this point in the offseason, it's not shocking to see a guy like Zary not have his contract done yet. There's a number of other restricted free agents around the league, especially guys that don't have arb rights. I mean, most of the guys who had arbitration rights either filed or have been settled, but obviously there's still a bunch that don't have that ability to do that just yet. They're still trying to figure things out. But apparently, from what we've heard on the Calgary Flames situation with Connor Zary, there seems to be a pretty different philosophy on what the next contract should look like. I know General Manager Craig Conroy did recently conduct an interview, and he didn't really get into specifics, but he basically, based on his comments, did basically confirm that they've each side's kind of taken a stance on what they want, and then obviously has different opinions, and that's where things stand, why there's a holdup. The belief is that the player would like to commit and do a longer-term contract, get that job security locked up, whereas the Flames would prefer to do a bridge deal and go shorter term. So term appears to be a major sticking point right now, at least between the Flames and Connor Zary. Hopefully sometime over the next month before a month or a little bit more than a month before training camp gets underway. We're probably still about 6 weeks away from that. There's plenty of time. See, that's the other thing too with these RFA cases. When there's no arbitration eligibility, there's no deadline at this point in the offseason, right? So deadlines often spur results. We know that. And there's no chance right now of the player missing training camp or missing games or anything. So sometimes, they keep talking gradually through the summer. They get it done. But it's not unusual to see a few of these kind of drag on into the beginning of training camp. And like I said, when you actually have real hard deadlines approaching is when both sides kind of, okay, we got to bridge the gap here and get it done and get the player back in the mix. So we'll see what happens with Zary in Calgary. Now, as I mentioned, we have a couple of interesting updates on some legendary NHL players. Jaromir Jagr appears to be continuing on well into his 50s. I thought there was a chance that he might actually finally retire, even though he is, an all-time NHL legend, an all-time NHL great, ranked so high in many categories, but can't be elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame because he's still actively playing. And, of course, he's playing for his hometown team in Kladno, for which he's an owner. Obviously, he said before he's concerned that if he didn't play that they would, lose interest, lose ticket sales, and he doesn't want the team to end up suffering financially because he doesn't want to play anymore. But at some point, it's going to have to happen. But yeah, apparently Jagr is expected to be at Kladno's training camp and compete with the Czech team next year, which is not far away. And Zdeno Chara, the longtime NHL defenseman, continues to marvel with and not only his athletic ability, but the fact that he's gotten into doing these marathons and triathlons post-NHL career. Like, this guy's in incredible shape, making a lot of us look bad, well now into his later years. Zdeno Chara just completed another triathlon, this time in France, and the location they were up in the mountains, more than 11,000 feet elevation. So that would have been even that much more of a challenge to it. But I swear there's been numerous times here in the last several months where he's been competing and completing these events between marathons and triathlons. He's just an absolute specimen. It's so great to see somebody like him keeping himself in such good shape and just being such a good role model for everybody, not just hockey players and younger players, but just people in general, to see what kind of work he puts in to look after himself, even though he's obviously, not a professional athlete anymore and is still competing in these competitions at such a high level. It's just absolutely incredible. And I know it's not really technically NHL news, but being a longtime NHL player, just wanted to acknowledge all the great things he's doing, and just continues to impress me and obviously, inspire to get in better shape and to stay healthy and to do all the things that he's been doing. Absolutely incredible. Big Z. Now, as I mentioned, a bunch of trade talk around the NHL, and we also want to talk about some offer sheets and Why have we not seen any? I've seen an interesting article from Jimmy Murphy of RG.org today he spoke to a player agent who answered some questions and did an interview anonymously. Didn't want to do this on the record officially, but talking about why has there not been offer sheets this year, and specifically why have we not seen an offer sheet for a prime candidate like Mason McTavish with the Anaheim Ducks. Now, of course, a couple of big key things here, which I don't think is really going to surprise anybody. But you got to remember, as we've talked about, and the agent says, if you look back to what we've seen recently with the Oilers and Blues situation with Broberg and Holloway, you have to overpay the player to have a real good chance to be successful, to get the player to sign it for one, and secondly, to make sure that their existing team is going to be yeah, that's too rich for our blood. No thanks, we'll take the compensation. So essentially, the agent says, if you're going to overpay a player, it doesn't matter if it's an unrestricted free agency or in this case as an RFA, you're going to have to overpay by a pretty substantial margin to really cripple a team's ability to match it and to kind of, take away their desire to match it, right? You may also have to structure the contract in a front-loaded, heavy signing bonus kind of way sometimes. There's different techniques you can do here. And any of those types of moves are likely going to require ownership approval. I mean, really, most GMs have the ability to make these decisions, but they're generally going to run it by their owner, especially when it comes to something like this, if they're going to overpay a player trying to land them through an offer sheet. So now the GMs are probably going to be a little bit more willing to kind of step out their comfort zone and not be too worried about the future like an owner would. GMs have a shorter shelf life than owners do. We know that. Now, GMs have a longer GMs do have a longer shelf life than coaches, of course, but, a GM might be with a team, depending on the level of success, maybe it's 4, 5, 6 years. Obviously, ownership often there much longer. If a GM knows that there's a good chance they're not going to be there in a couple of years if things don't work out, they're probably going to be more willing to take the chance that it's going to work, right? But ownership, they're going to feel differently about things. So obviously the ownership part of this is going to play a big role here. So the owner is going to be looking at this saying if we don't get the player, all we're going to end up doing is driving up the market value for that said player. And while the other owners are going to be impacted because that's now a comparable contract that other guys looking for deals are going to be using, right? So you're going to create and change the marketplace for the position of the player you're targeting. And other owners are probably not going to be real thrilled with you for doing that. So there is that as well. Obviously, the other part of this is that you better make sure you're successful if you're going to do it, because owners are going to be more concerned with basically the words where you don't want to look like an idiot. And essentially, I'm sorry to say it, but back when Montreal offer sheeted Sebastian Aho, that's basically what happened there. That I don't know why they thought that offer sheet was going to be successful. I know when we first heard the news that Montreal had presented an offer sheet to Aho and he signed it, we were all whoa, I can't believe this happened. We're can't wait to see the details. And then we got the details of the contract that was offered, and we're oh, okay. The only part of it, in that case, that we really thought maybe it would work would be the fact that they front-loaded it with so many bonuses. We knew Tom Dundon, the owner of the Hurricanes, wasn't real crazy about that, and that might be the part where he says, I'm not doing that, right? Unfortunately, he didn't care, and he probably did care, but not enough to the point to let Montreal get the player. Then, of course, that started a whole retaliation thing, which is why they got crazy with the offer sheet on the Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Of course, that kind of backfired. I don't think that one's worked out too well. And, as we've seen retaliation there, like I said, you have to be cautious for looking like an idiot. And I think in some cases, Montreal looked like an idiot for not really structuring that contract properly to land Aho. And then I think you could say Carolina kind of looked like an idiot too for how they responded, retaliated, and then had egg on their face for not really, for overpaying a player that hasn't worked out for them. He's been a fourth line center on an 8-year deal, making big money. So, I mean, either way, say what you want. I'm sure different people on here will feel differently about each of those scenarios. But at the end of the day, it hasn't worked out. And that's a prime example of how you have to be careful. And between that and with the Ducks, specifically with McTavish, they have all kinds of cap space. So, like I said, unless you're going to really overpay drastically, like you're just going to get laughed at and be like, well, yeah, we're just going to match that. You know what I mean? They're not, and teams are going to rarely do it to the point where they're going to have to give up like 4 first-round picks. So they're not going to get like, $11, $12 million or something like bonkers, right? So that's why we haven't seen any offer sheets. The most likely candidates, when we talked about this before the offseason really get into it too much, probably would have been like in the early part of June before the Stanley Cup final was done. I honestly thought that the more likely scenario that if we're going to see offer sheets weren't on the big names, the top guys that are going to be able to command $7, $8, $9, $10 million. It's going to be on some of the maybe the lower tiered players that are still really good, but guys that are going to be able to command, $2 million, $3 million, $1.5 million, something like that. Whereas, if a guy's maybe his value is 1.5 and a team comes along and offers 3.5, something like that, that's going to, and if a team has a bad cap situation, like we saw with Edmonton, that'll put pressure on and that might be better to work out. So ultimately, that's why it hasn't happened. A lot of the guys that were on the lower scale or that would have been more prime candidates, a lot of them got done early because teams were concerned about it. There were some legit opportunities too. K-Andre Miller was an offer sheet threat that ended up going, into a trade. So there was some talk. Carolina actually was one of the main teams out there that was looking at it and, might have seen it happen had some of the teams they talked to, like the Rangers, not play ball. But yeah, when it comes to McTavish, at this point, we know that there's still a major gap between what the team and player is looking for. There still continues to be rumors around him maybe being traded. I've seen him linked to a lot of teams. Everybody wants to link him to a team like Montreal because he's a big, strong number 1, number 2 center, and that's certainly a hole in their lineup that they're looking to fill. But again, at this point, we don't really have any solid evidence that the Ducks want to trade him, just that they're in a contract dispute. So we'll have to continue to monitor that situation. Now, another team I want to touch on as well is the Buffalo Sabres. Frank Saravalli, on his latest videos that he's been posting with Bleacher Report, says that essentially he thinks the reason we haven't seen a ton of activity at a Buffalo is that the GM, Kevin Adams, is probably a little bit, gun shy, trigger shy, whatever you want to call it, after seeing many other deals that this regime has made, especially some of which not because he wanted to. A lot of it came because he kind of had to. But seeing a lot of former Sabres really succeed and win Stanley Cups elsewhere in the last couple of years has caused him to be a little bit, reluctant to pull the trigger here and to be careful. They're probably second guessing themselves on a lot of deals. We've seen, look at, Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, a couple of prime examples there. Although, like I said, those are not scenarios that the team said, oh, I think we're going to trade this guy. They were kind of forced into it. Same thing with J.J. Peterka, which is the main deal that we've seen with any significant change on this team this offseason was that Peterka deal, and that was kind of forced upon them because of the pressure from the player and their agent and Peterka's camp. But obviously, as Sarah Valley says, we're still widely expected to see some change with the Sabres before the season starts, but he feels that Adams is a little gun shy in that sense. There's still a lot of people wondering about the future of Bo Byram. Yes, he signed a 2-year contract. He very well could stick it out and stay. Maybe they take a little longer here to decide on a long-term future. I still personally wonder if they're going to keep Josh Norris or could he. I think Josh Norris would be a perfect candidate for Vancouver myself if they could work out a deal. I just don't know what that trade would look like, but I know that the Canucks were after him when he was still in Ottawa. I still wonder as well about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. They brought in Alex Lyon. We know Devin Levi just got re-signed as a RFA goalie, and certainly he has still some eligibility to play in the minors. But again, I guess depending on how things go this year, I can see some of those players still possibly being on the move. But Sarah Valley thinks there's going to be trades. It's just that Adams is kind of gun shy here, being overly cautious because of what's happened with other guys, which I can understand. In Colorado, I know there's an update from Colorado Hockey Now saying that they still believe that the team has earlier in the offseason had conversations and continues to have conversations about possibly trading defenseman Samuel Girard. Of course, Girard's a little bit of a smaller defenseman, but a great skater, very quick. Obviously, there's lots to like about his game. There's certainly a few aspects of it, I think, that are, he's not a superstar player, but he is a pretty decent, solid number, probably number 4 in a lot of teams, like a second pair guy. I don't think he's really slated for being third pair duty. But obviously the Avs have a very tight cap situation. They could use some more flexibility. He's been mentioned as a cap casualty for a few years and has survived not getting moved here just yet. But according to the people at Colorado Hockey Now, they do believe that if the Avs have other moves they would like to make, and that trading Girard before the season starts is a real possibility. And of course, we also talked the other day about the Vancouver Canucks in an article. This was, I think, probably 2 or 3 days ago. I think it was 3 actually, from an article from Daily Hive looking at some centerman targets for the Canucks, because we know the Canucks definitely want to add down the middle. We've got numerous NHL connected reporters and insiders saying that that's definitely their primary focus. We went through a bunch of names that were not even necessarily guys that the Canucks were actually having trade talks about or anything, but some targets that made sense for Vancouver on different levels, and some of which that we know the Canucks have at least inquired on. I know we looked at Montreal and Kirby Dach, but there was also mention about Alex Newhook. Talked about Alexis Lafreniere maybe being one. We looked at Josh Norris, who I mentioned earlier with Buffalo. Dmitry Voronkov was in that article as well as a potential target for them out of Columbus. There's a few others as well. I think Alex Laferriere, who just signed yesterday in Los Angeles. But obviously we know that they're mainly looking for centers. So not all the guys mentioned in the article were centers. Some were wingers. But I do wonder more about between Dach and Newhook. Just to touch on that again, I think Newhook might be the more likely guy that might be the better fit in Vancouver. But not only that, if I had to predict between Dach and Newhook who would be more likely to be traded, I would say probably Newhook. I mean, for one, we have the injury history around Dach. That's going to shy teams away. I know Montreal likes Newhook, but I'm just wondering, with all the young centermen that they've got in their system now, I wonder if they feel that if Newhook is capped out at being a 3C, if he could be replaced, and that maybe they could trade him to bring back something else that they like to help the team in a different area. So, last year we saw a little bit of Oliver Kapanen. Obviously, I know Michael Hage is in the system. I'm not sure when he's coming out of college. Obviously Koivu, who was drafted in 2024, is looking pretty good too. And some of these guys could be ideal number 3 centers. I mean, Owen Beck is still in the system as well. I know he's a little bit older now, so I'm not sure where things stand with Owen Beck, but there's a number of younger prospects in the system that I just wonder that if Montreal could replace Newhook. Now, the one thing Newhook has is incredible speed. Now, depending on how they feel about some of these other guys, they may say, we have one of our other prospect guys that are really looking good as a number 3 center. If they can get a good return out of Newhook to Vancouver, maybe that's something they consider. But if I had to say Montreal is going to move one or the other, I think Dach is a risky trade for a lot of teams. I think that they're going to have to give him every opportunity to be a number 2. And then if they do that, and if it works out, and Dach can stay healthy and play the role of the 2C, that's obviously going to keep Newhook down on the third line, and it might make him expendable. So, would a team like Vancouver come calling? I mean, I know he's not, like I said, not going to give them super big production, but he is a terrific skater, and in the right role, I can see with the right wingers, maybe maybe he could play a bigger role with another team. It's hard to say, but let me know your thoughts about Alex Newhook. Does he make sense for the Canucks to target? Obviously, it was the other day when we looked at this article, Daily Hive, there's lots of names mentioned there. Just let me know what your thoughts are on the Newhook and Doc situation. I think Doc's going to be given every chance to be the number 2 in Montreal this year. So I think Newhook might become expendable based on the play of some of the younger players. But they may not be right away either. Like, they might want to give some of these guys some more time and hang on to Newhook a little bit later. If Newhook isn't traded before the season starts or even early in the season, I'm not sure that he has a super long future there with all these guys coming up behind him. He's going to have a lot of pressure on him. They have Jake Evans already signed longer term to be like a fourth line guy. If Doc works out to be the number 2 guy, then they're going to have a bunch of these prospects pushing probably for that spot on the third line if they can grab it, depending on how they feel about him compared to other guys. So we'll see what happens in that scenario as well. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.